What's going on, everybody? You know, it's been a while since I've even done anything. Please let me know if you can hear me okay before I actually get started. At least on my end, audio sounds just fine. But do I sound clear? Am I echoing or just anything? Anything at all? Anything? Audio's good. All right. Thank you, Pool Hub. Thank you. All right, there we go. Now they're starting to come in. Look at this. We got audio is good from Pool Hub. Let's see here. John Smith says everything's good. Christopher Lano, audio is good. All right, there we go. Just wanted to make sure. Okay. So first and foremost, I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, or whatever it is that you might celebrate. If you do celebrate this particular holiday here. If anybody's wondering, I am recovered from my ankle surgery. For anybody that knows about it, I'm able to walk. I do walk very carefully, so it does look like I kind of wobble when I walk because what the doctor had explained to me is that my leg bone and my foot bone have not finished fusing together. It's partially fused together. And then the screws and stuff that are actually holding the bones together are still holding everything else in place. And the doctor said it could take up to a year or two before the bones completely fuse together. But in the meantime, that doesn't mean that I can't do anything. I'm starting to exercise again. I've been playing pool again. I've been back at league and stuff, shooting pool. Definitely still a lot of rust that I got to clean off, but everything's good. Now, now that I've gotten that out of the way, everybody's wondering, well, what are we doing here? Well, you saw the title, you saw the thumbnail. My coach contacted me a couple of weeks ago and said that he has an idea. He came up with this topic and he wants to share it with everybody. And of course, whenever my coach wants to share anything, I'm always happy to host. So that way he can reach a wider audience and perhaps gain some more clientele to go with that. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring my coach in here. So give me just a second. And here we are. Demetrius, give me a sound check.
Hello, I can hear you. How's it going?
All right. Does everybody hear Demetrius okay? Definitely don't want to just start talking and then nobody can hear anything. That would not be good.
Testing. All right.
All right, it looks like everything's okay. Looks like you can be heard. So I'm just gonna sit back and enjoy the ride. Demetrius, the floor is yours. Let everybody know what we're doing here.
Hey guys. All right. So I'll introduce myself. I'm sure many of you guys have seen me before. So if you've seen me before and you risked returning, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Happy holidays to all. And enough celebrating. It's time to get to work on our pool game. I'm Demetrius. Yeah, I'm Chris's coach. I'm lucky enough to have him as a friend. So thank you, Chris, for doing this. I do full-time pool coaching. So if anybody's interested, check out MNPoolBootCamp.com. It's MN for Minnesota, MNPoolBootCamp.com. You don't have to live in Minnesota. You can just come here and train. I do 3-day sessions, and I help people that really want to learn how to play a high-level game. I help them identify where they're at, different parts of their game, target some areas where they're, being held back, and then put together a plan to develop those areas and strengthen them, and not just teach, but also train and develop those areas. So when you leave here, you play higher level, physically, mentally, and then have a roadmap about how to keep developing your game. That's what I do. I really love this game, and I love to share it with people that want to keep getting better. So look me up. But tonight, we have a mystery that we need to solve. And so I'm enlisting everybody's help, Chris, and everybody listening. We're all in this together tonight. I have ideas, but there is something I've been watching pool for, full time. I've been doing this for 5 years. Every week I watch players play. And so when we think about what holds people back, it's not always the things that we think should, like, the answers aren't always obvious. They're not always like, well, they just need to work on their fundamentals or they need to shoot the balls in better. There's some real strange mysteries about holes in people's game. I'm going to bring to everybody's attention one area where I see a massive hole in a lot of people's game. And we can talk about how to fix it. We're going to talk about how to fix it. But part of it is just understanding why. Like, I don't even, like, why is it this way? Okay. Let me start by telling the story. I'm going to share, actually, you know what? I'm not going to share. I'm going to switch cameras to the overhead. Let's see. Did that work, Chris?
Yes. Everybody should be seeing the overhead of your table now.
All right. So I've got a story about this run. And what happened was I had a student here, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. Very good player. He could run 9-ball racks on a 9-foot diamond. Pretty strong player. And one of the things that we were talking about was target creation. Meaning, where do we need to get our cue ball to keep running balls confidently? And so what we did is, if you look at this 4-ball run, thinking kind of backwards from where we want to be, we got to run these in order, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the second to last shot is this 8-ball. Well, we couldn't be behind the 9-ball, right? That wouldn't be a very good position. Nor would we want to be this thin on the 8. So there's only one spot to get on this table, which is pretty much even with the 8-ball. We had a little range here. So what we did is we actually drew on the table. We drew on a target. And the target kind of went from here to here. We didn't want to be thinner than this. So all this was no good. And we didn't want to be thicker than this because we didn't want to be hooked. But we also didn't want to be frozen on the rail because that's difficult. Okay, no problem. So then we went back and we looked at where we needed to be on the 7-ball. And straight in on the 7 wasn't the best because, boy, if we stop, we're kind of trapped on the rail, right? But on the other hand, if we're way out here, now when we cut the 7-ball in, our cue ball is coming pretty hot. It's going to be hard to hold for the 8, which means that there was a little area out here where we could roll the 7 in and hit our window for the 8. Okay, so we went all the way back. It was a 9-ball run. We went all the way back to the 1-ball, and we drew targets for the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, all the way up to the 8. And this player, who's a very good player, currently winning state championships and playing very well, he made the 6 and landed in that target that we drew for the 7-ball. And then he made the 7 and landed in this target that I drew for the 8-ball. And then he did something that's had me mystified for the last 4 years. He shot this 8-ball in, and the cue ball bounced out to here, where he had to thin cut this in with the bridge. So, of course he made it, But let's see here. I'm going to switch back. So I watched this, and this was really strange because that wasn't very good position on the 9. And I realized I did not draw a target for the 9-ball. I drew a target on the table for every other shot, and he hit every other target. But I didn't draw a target for the 9-ball. And he left himself pretty bad position. And so this has nagged at me for years, guys, so you can help me with this one. But here are some of the questions I asked. So the first question was, why did he put the cue ball where he put the cue ball on the 9-ball? Granted, I didn't draw a target. But the first question is, did he, in his mind, visualize a spot that he wanted the cue ball, and then he just failed to get it there? Or did he not even visualize where he wanted the cue ball? Like, did he create a target and just fail to hit it? Or did he not create a target? That's the first question. The second question is, I'm his coach. Why didn't I draw a target for the 9? I drew a target for all the other balls. Why didn't I draw a target for the 9-ball? And let's see, I'm looking at notes. Okay, so let's start with those two questions. I'm curious. I'm really curious. The last question that was on my mind as I thought about this over the ensuing weeks was target. It was about, I started really obsessing about target creation. And I started asking myself, do I create targets for the cue ball on every single shot? On every single shot, do I do this, or is it only some of the time? And so I started looking at how I actually create targets. Because when it comes to how I play pool, I create targets really well. And so I started paying attention to what I did and how I did it, and the differences between how I create targets and how other people do. So do we have any answers, Chris? I can't see the chat. Did he create a target and fail to hit it, or did he not create a target? And why didn't I create a target for him? Does anybody have any guesses or thoughts?
I don't see any answers to that question. But what I was wondering was your player attempting to play short side position and overran it to where he...
No, he was a 13-year-old kid that the first time we played a race to 5, he had me down 4-0 on this 9-foot diamond here. He got me down 4-0 race to 5. I came back and won, but I'm telling you, the kid played good at 13.
Wow.
And I've had a chance to work with him for 3 days twice. And like I said, when he was 14, I think the week before he turned 15, he won the state championship, even up. He's a hell of a player, and now he's like 16, and he's like a junior national, super strong player.
Is this Hank?
No, but it's I don't think he cares. It's Eddie Vondro. Eddie Vondro. I don't know if you know Eddie. He relocated into like Virginia, North Virginia area, or West Virginia, North Virginia. Well, I'm mixing it up. He's like Northern Virginia. It's not North Virginia. It's not a state, but he moved to like Northern Virginia. But anyway, he's playing real good. He's a good kid. I haven't talked to him for a while, but nowadays. He's hitting them pretty good. But anyway, okay, what do you think, Chris? Why don't you answer that question?
Well, I do have one here for you. Give me just a second. It says, this is from Loping CSF on YouTube. It says, initial guess is harder position takes more focus. After a few of those, it's easy to relax. Too much on the easy position shot. So was it a shot that he just took for granted?
So that's a very good question. Yeah. So for sure, that's a great point. That when people feel like the work is done, oftentimes they quit trying. And just while we're waiting on other answers to roll in and stuff, this is a loose format, guys, because I wanted room to do exactly what we're doing. So, I'm sorry, what was the gentleman's name that answered?
This was from Loping CSF. I've got a couple more if you want to hear them.
Okay, hang on. So Loping, that's one really good answer. Here's what happened the other day. I had a player who had to make this 8-9, and you can almost tell that their thought process was just make the 8 and 9 ball is automatic and I win. Basically, in their mind, they were just telling themselves, just make the 8 and I'm sure I'll win. And then they got down, they made the 8, and they came across. That's not bad. They glued themselves on this rail. And all of a sudden they came over and they just weren't mentally prepared for anything. They just weren't prepared to have to shoot a shot off the rail. And they got down and shot that ball in the point. And so this is a good answer. There's not one answer. There's a bunch of answers, but that's one good answer. And the point is that we make all these secret bargains with ourselves, where we make a promise to ourselves. We say, if I make this ball, if I can just make this ball, I'm sure I'm good. And then we make that ball and we're not good. And then sometimes we feel like there was injustice, from like some cosmic injustice, like, but I did what I said I was going to do. And I actually have this on my notepad, so I'm glad he brought this up, which is the secret. Here's my notes. It says, we make secret deals with ourselves where we say to ourselves, all I can ask for myself is to just make this ball. And if I do that, I'm sure I'll be fine. And then we make that ball and we land somewhere funny and we're not prepared for it because we just made a deal with ourselves. So if we make this, we're good. And now we made this and it's tough still. And we just weren't budgeted for more adversity. So that's why you can never make those secret deals. If you ever catch yourself making secret deals with yourself, I'm telling you guys, take a deep breath and say, no. There's a certain shot that's correct. And I'm going to ask myself to do what's correct. So instead of just saying, just make the 8 ball, I'll be okay. Again, maybe if we created a zone and said, we need to be a little off the rail to make sure we have good. And Yeah, good answer. What else we got?
So this one comes from Trevor Simpson, also from YouTube, says he thinks there was no target in mind, most likely, but he's also heard that this is a similar issue that you can have in 8-ball. And I think in general, just picking your targets and stuff would exist. And then I've got another one here from Gregory Scott, also from YouTube. He says, did not create a target because so focused on everything else. When he got positioned on the 7th, he was so relieved, he relaxed and got quote unquote lazy.
Okay, good. So I agree. No target creation. Fair enough. So the 3 questions were, did he create a target and fail to hit it? Or did he just not create it? I think we're in agreement he didn't create it. So then the second question was, why didn't I draw a target? I'm his coach. Why didn't I draw a target for the 9? And I thought about that. And since I'm the guy that didn't draw the target, I'll answer that one. I just thought it was so obvious. I thought, like, to me, this stuff is so obvious that I was surprised. Like, I see this stuff like it's glowing on the table. When I look at the table, it's like there's glowing sections where I need to land my cue ball, and it's so visible to me. I just forgot. I forgot that not everybody could see that. So it was like, it's like if you're playing Scotch doubles with somebody and you play shape for the game ball, which is hanging in the corner pocket. You might not even think to warn them, don't follow it in. You just assume that they wouldn't follow that ball in because to you, that's obvious. Well, to me, targets are obvious. And then I realized they're not obvious to everybody else. So we're here. That's why we're here. Okay. So then the last question was, do I create targets on every single shot I shoot? And I started paying attention to how I play. And the answer is yes. On every single shot I shoot, I create a target. Now, there's some nuance. Not every shot I shoot involves me having to walk around the table and point and pick lint off the table and stuff with my fingers. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But every single shot, I have a target. So tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about target creation, how to do it effectively. But we're also going to talk about where, why are some of the reasons people don't do this? Now, we've heard laziness. So, all right. So before I ask the next question, besides laziness, I want to start brainstorming all the possible reasons why people don't create targets. Why wouldn't people create targets? There's a bunch of reasons, and the reason we have to talk about it is we can talk about what we should do, but if there's reasons why people are reluctant to do it, we have to understand the barriers between us and that successful habit. It's like we have to clear the weeds to grow our garden. So what are the reasons why people might not want to create targets on every shot? We've got to think about that. And as you guys think about that, let's just talk about why it's important, I guess, for a second. First is you can only get so good at shooting balls in. And after you shoot balls in, you max out your make percentages. Then the game starts becoming about leaving yourself good position. And what does it mean to leave yourself good position? Well, obviously, you put yourself where you have a good shot and a good angle to get on the next ball. Well, in order to have good position, you have to know what good position is and what bad position is. So if you don't know the difference between good and bad position, how are you going to get it? So people, when people are focused on playing position, they're always thinking about their cue ball control. I want to learn to control my cue ball. But control it where? And so half of the battle, guys, there's cue ball control and there's pattern play. Cue ball control is the ability to hit your target. Pattern play is the ability to visualize effectively where your targets are. And, so it's just it's a little bit more abstract, and maybe it's not as sexy. Everybody wants to work on their fundamentals and their pocketing and their draw shots. Then they want to work on their cue ball, but it doesn't matter. So here's an interesting story. Zig Ziglar. Do you remember Zig Ziglar?
I do not.
I don't know. Yeah, he's a Southern guy. He was a sales coach and motivational speaker from the 70s and 80s. And he told the story of the greatest archer that ever lived, who back then was Howard Hill. And he tells some story. He went on and on and on about how good Howard Hill shot the bow and arrow. And then at the end of this whole story about how good Howard Hill was, he said that he could take anybody in the audience. He said, I'm not an archer, but I'm a coach extraordinaire. Give me half an hour with anyone in the audience, provided that your eyesight is normal, and I'll have you in half an hour hitting the bullseye more consistently than Howard Hill could on the best day of his career.
That's a bold statement.
He said, well, there's one little caveat. And that's assuming that I get to first blindfold Howard Hill and spin him around a few times. So he doesn't know exactly where the bullseye is. And then he says, now, you might be laughing and thinking, well, how? Of course not. I mean, how are you going to hit a target you can't see? He says, yeah, well, I got a better question. How can you hit a target that doesn't even exist? Now, he told the story in a lecture on goals. If you guys are interested in, goal setting, Zig Ziglar goals. And the point is, think about how tough it is to hit a target you can't see, and then realize it's impossible to hit a target that doesn't exist. And so when it's like you take the best shot maker in the world, Josh Filler, Jason Shaw, whatever, it's like every shot they look at the pocket because that's what they want to hit. Like they don't, if you put goggles on front of them where they couldn't even see the pocket, they're not going to play very well. And if they were on a billiard table with 3-cushion billiard table with no pockets, Josh Filler's not going to run a single ball. It doesn't matter how good he shoots. There's no target. So we have to, in pool, you've got to work on your pocketing. Then you got to leave yourself good shots. And pool is not just a game of putting balls in pockets. It's a game of creating and hitting targets on the table. Creating and hitting targets. Okay, so that's the importance of hitting targets and creating targets. The importance of creating targets is that it gives you a place you can hit. So what are some of the reasons, besides laziness, that people don't create targets? I've thought about this for years, guys. This has troubled me.
I've got a couple of answers for you. So we'll go down the line. From John Smith, he says overconfidence. I was going to go along with ego, like meaning that I know the cue ball is going to land where I want it to land. So I don't even have to create the target. So I just hit it. And then you find out that you don't make it. Trevor Simpson says lack of process. S3204 says don't bother because the general target area is so big. So I think that's overestimation. Dirk Ridley says don't actually know where the cue ball is going. That's always a good answer.
Yes, fair.
Christopher Lano says they might fail to hit the target. So maybe a little hesitancy there.
Yeah.
Easy Breeze says reluctantly to use non-center ball strokes, so maybe they're afraid to spin the cue ball. Goba 44 says don't want to waste opponent's time measuring, so you're taking into your opponent's your opponent is taken into consideration. The shot might be too thin. This is from Chris Ferlano again. Says so your cue ball is basically getting turned loose, and so maybe you just don't know where it's going. Let's see here. Trevor Simpson chimes in again, says lack of understanding where the cue ball can go versus what are realistic positions that are achievable.
100%. I think these are some very good answers, guys. Very good answers. Yeah.
And the last one I have is not sure how to get the cue ball to go there. Not sure what the target is. Not sure where the cue ball is going after the first rail. Basically, just a lot of unknowns. Yeah. The only thing you know is you're going to pocket the ball.
So you know what's funny is when we get down to it, now these weren't the only answers, but I just want to point out that a lot of the answers fall into one of two buckets, and they're opposites from each other. So one bucket is ego, overconfidence, laziness, and kind of like, I'm fine anywhere. It's a huge target. I'll just get on the ball. I'm sure I'm going to be fine. I don't need to worry about it. Alfred E. Newman. What? Me worry? I'm good. Just make this ball. I'm sure I'll be fine. So that's half the bucket answers are overconfidence. And then the other half of the answers like, ooh, I don't really know if I can hit the target, though. And if I look at the target, I don't really know if I can make the cue ball go there and how to make the cue ball go there. And if worrying about that's going to distract me. And if so it's almost like half the answers are, I don't need to worry about a target. The other half of the answers, I don't know if I can hit it anyway, so I'm not going to worry about it. And so, or I don't know how to do it. I don't really know how to do that. I don't know if I can do it. So I'm not sure I'm good enough. So I just won't worry about it. I hope it works out. Isn't that weird? So, yeah. And I'm guessing that the same people do opposite stuff where they're overconfident some of the time and then they're kind of defeated some of the time. And yeah, that reminds me of, there's a funny story about that. I'll give you the real short cliff notes on this one, Chris. I had a very difficult shot that was hard to aim because it was like you're playing one ball off another ball. Sometimes it's hard to aim a carom. It was a rail first carom, by the way. I had to make this ball a rail first off another ball. It was one of those shots that's kind of hard to aim. So I aimed it, and that was a hill. It's hill. And I get down, and I wasn't really confident that I was striking where I'd aimed. So here I am, hill, down on this shot. and I'm not really confident that I'm striking, like my cue ball is actually going where I picked. And the thought came through my mind, and the thought was, well, I mean, you weren't really sure that was the right spot to hit it anyway. You know, when you aimed that rail first carom, you weren't 100% that that was the right spot anyway. So just because you're not hitting where you aimed, maybe you mishit this shot, but maybe you weren't actually, maybe you were aiming the wrong spot anyway, and your mishit happens to cancel out for your wrong aim, and it happens to go in. And I stopped and I stood up. I'm like, that can't be the right thing to be thinking about on the hill, you know? So I got down, re-aimed it until I felt like best guess, that's 100% where I'm committed to. And then I got down until I felt like I was committed to hitting there, and I sent it, and it happened, and it worked out, and I won the set. And so the point is that when you start thinking like, I don't really know if that's the right spot to aim, and I don't really know if I'm hitting where I'm aiming, so maybe it cancels out, like, yeah. So not kind of a little murky. That's not what we want to think. Okay, any other answers that before we I want to hear your answers too, Chris. What do you think?
I was going to go off of the idea of ego. That's the answer that I'm sticking towards. Like, why wouldn't a person create target zones is ego? Because one, they don't need to. Two, they're over, which ego plays into being overconfidence that no matter where the cue ball lands, I'm going to have a shot, and not actually realize the difficulty of the shot that they might end up with. No, I know I do that sometimes. I'll sit there and say like, well, I know I'm going to hit the rail and the cue ball's going to come over here. And once it gets over here, I think I'm golden. And that's where my thought process will end. And what has happened sometimes is I will hit the shot. I will think I'm golden. But then when I walk over to the cue ball and look at the shot, I go, crap, this is a little bit harder than I thought. And not realizing that I should have planned just a little bit deeper into the previous shot that got me there.
Yeah, 100%. So here's what I've got written down for my notes. So first of all, you know, some people might not know what's important. Maybe nobody ever told them. Maybe nobody ever told them that on every shot, you're supposed to create a target for the cue ball and try to hit it. Maybe nobody ever told them that that's big, that's important. So people don't know what they don't know. You know, if nobody ever told them, then why would they develop a habit if they didn't even know they needed it? Another one is that maybe some people are lazy, or they just don't want to play that way. They feel like it's like kind of like, well, I don't want to be one of them guys that like walks around the table and picks loons and drawing lines. Like, that's not pool, man. That's not pool. Pool is just getting in the ring and firing balls in and coming with shots and catching your rhythm. And I don't want to like play that way. I just don't want to play that way. I think some people feel that way. And again, these reasons overlap. Maybe the reason they feel that way is because they don't know how to do it very well. And they don't, and this ties in with like another thing, which is like flow. You know, they just want to flow. They just want to kind of, that's not the, like, it's almost like the less fun part of the job. It's like, okay, so suppose you run a business and I don't know, your business, you sell lemonade or something. It's like the fun part is interacting with the customers and selling the lemonade and pouring the lemonade and, you know, counting the money. Nobody wants to like file their taxes. Nobody wants to set aside, you know, nobody wants to do the QuickBooks budgeting, right? That's not the fun part of the job for most people. So, but it's got to get done. So maybe the drawing the boxes, you know, people are like, nah, man, that's not pool. Pool is just about like getting shots and shooting balls in and kind of getting your blood flowing and coming with shots. And, you know, and so maybe they just don't want to do it. So maybe they're either, they don't know what's important. They don't want to play that way. It's not the fun part of the job. They might just be too lazy. They might not know how to do it. And then a lot of times, like I said, people might just not, and like you guys said too, people might doubt their own ability. They doubt their own ability to do this effectively. And so then they're kind of like, well, if I slow down and think, I've heard a lot of people say this stuff, you know, I'm better off just flowing through, because if I slow down, I start thinking negative thoughts and I start overthinking stuff, it just doesn't go good. So I just don't do that. Which to me is that's a really poor excuse. You could say that. You could tell yourself that story about how if you slow down and think, it's going to throw you off your game. So that's why you don't think. You can tell yourself that story, but there's a cost. And the cost is you're going to play bad patterns, a bad cue ball, and bad pool the rest of your life with that mindset. So a better thing to do is, instead of saying, I can't slow down and think, it's going to throw me off, a better question is, how can I extract some valuable techniques of target creation and integrate it to my game in a way that's not disruptive? How can I integrate that so that my game gets better, not worse? That's a better question. Yeah. Okay.
So I wanted to piggyback off of what you said there, because this is what I've been incorporating with a lot of my players that I coach here in my area. Because in the beginning, I would teach them generic positioning, which I think is kind of what you're talking about, which has the downside of it. It's like, yeah, you can see the ball and you're in position for the next ball, but you don't realize how difficult the shot is for that next ball, even though you can see it. And so for a lot of my players that have been progressing, I've been telling them more, now we got to get away from generic positioning to specific positioning, because now you're starting to learn that, yeah, you can see the ball, but you don't realize how hard the shot is. And not just because the shot might be easy, but the transition to the next ball is so much harder. So now we got to find that balance to where, okay, we got to complicate the previous shot just a little bit, because now we're trying to hit a specific target instead of a general target. And then that way, the next shot balances itself out to where, yeah, it might be a little more difficult than the generic positioning, but then the transition is also a little bit easier as well. So it's finding a balance between making sure that every shot is relatively the same, and relatively the same meaning you can make the shot and move to the next shot. Because if you're finding yourself in positions where you can make the current shot, but the transition is so freaking difficult that if you try to hit the transition, you end up missing the current shot.
We're gonna get into that right now. Chris, that's a great segue. Before we make the segue, I want to just assure people right now we're going to get into, I want to teach people how to create targets. And I want to tell you guys something good news. If you're worried that this is going to be too difficult, if you're worried that this is going to be too disruptive to your rhythm, if you're worried that you're not going to do it right, guess what? By even going down this road at all, you're going to be in the top 1%. Because I'm telling you guys, I watch good players, guys that fly to my house, tournament players, guys that play. There's a lot of players, guys, that have their game is on fire. Their game is on fire. And if you can go down this road, like, you will be, you don't have to be great. Remember, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I'm telling you guys, if you go down this road, you don't have to be good. You just have to be less bad than everybody else, and you'll have an edge. There's my inspiration. Okay, so let's look at it. What's that?
I just love the way you say that.
I mean, I just quote other people. Okay, so I steal cool quotes. That's how I get off. I take credit for other people's cool quotes. Okay, so let's look at the thing, and I'll tell you why we call this invisible blockers. Let me share the screen here real quick. Can you guys see this pool table on the screen?
They should be able to. Please confirm in the chat if you could see everything.
It should be like a 3-ball run.
And it looks like you're good to go.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about target creation, and I'm going to show you why I call this segment the invisible blockers. We have a 3-ball run with stripes. And by the way, there's a couple mistakes people make when it comes to target creation. One mistake is, it's like Goldilocks. One mistake is it's too big. They have these huge, vague zones where, like, they just wait. If I said, where do you need to get shape on the 14? They just kind of wave their hand around the table and be like, well, somewhere out here. And the zone is really vague and big. And then I point in that huge zone. I point at different spots. I'm like, well, what about here? They're like, ooh, that would be pretty bad. Well, what about here? Oh, yeah, I guess that would be pretty bad too. Well, then why did you wave your hand there? So then I ask them again, where do you want to be? Because that was way too big. And then they'll do the other thing, and they'll point to one spot on the table. So I want to be here. Like, well, that's too small. Because you can't land on a dime. I mean, sometimes you can, but, not always. So it's got to be big enough to hit, but small enough that the entire thing is effective. So in this position, we've got 3 balls on the table. What would be a big mistake? If somebody was going to fail to run these 3 balls, how might they, what would be the big mistake? I know somebody in the chat knows the answer, so help me out here. If somebody failed to run these 3 balls, how might this fail?
The infamous "what could go wrong" question.
What could go wrong? The most important question in pool.
And don't be, we're not looking for obvious answers like you can miss the 9, or you can miss the 14, or you can miss the 8. Like those, missing a shot is always the obvious answer. There's a deeper answer into this question. And I've already trained with Demetrius enough that I know the answer.
Hopefully, we're going to start with some softball, so hopefully everybody can see it. If
Yeah,
not,
see, I don't know if this counts, but this is from Nate Tam. He says, if you land straight in on the 14.
yeah. So, hey, Nate, what's going on, my man? So, absolutely right. So let's look at after the 9 ball is gone. The problem is if we get full on this 14 ball, well, we've made the 9, we can make the 14, but it's very tough to get position on the 8. We don't want to play shape for the 8 short side because we need to land on a dime, and if we don't, we're going to have a very difficult shot. So what we need to do is create a target. So when I create targets, guys, I'm going to make this really simple. 3 zones. The first zone is the sidewalk zone. The second zone is the balance beam zone. And the third zone is everything outside of that is tightrope. This is how I look at things. Sidewalks are 95% plus. Anything that's like almost a sure thing, that's a sidewalk. Balance beams, 75%. Yeah, you're probably pretty good there, but it could go wrong. And then tight ropes are where you land on it, where you're like, I'm like 50-50 or less. So just so we don't have to talk about every little inch being a different percentage, technically, if we wanted to map out the whole table, we could talk each inch of the table would have a different percentage, but we're just going to bucket it into 95%, 75%, and 50-50. So Nate is absolutely right. Here is where I'd love to be after pocketing the 9. I would love to be right here on the 14, where I have a nice, easy shot with a nice angle to naturally float down to the 8. Because, by the way, my 8-ball target is here. Okay, so, if I'm feeling that's probably fine too. We could probably extend it out. Okay, that's my 8-ball target. So if I'm where the cue ball is now, I can hit that target on the 8. So then, what we've just done, we've gone from that vague area to an exact point. But remember, a point's not big enough. So now I got to ask myself, how far back on this line can I move the cue ball where I still feel like it's like 95%? And the answer is, I'm fine here. This is 95%. And then once I get past about, I don't know, here, I still feel pretty good right about here. But once I go further than this, it starts getting to be a little dicey. So I'm going to just mark a little dot there. That's as far back as I can go. Now, how much this way can I go? Well, I can come to about here and about here. I feel that with this angle right here, anything on this line, I'm fine to make this and come down over to here. But if I get thicker than this line, I'm in trouble. So that's the thickest I'd want to be. What about on the other side? Well, I don't want to be so thin I miss the 14, but, this seems pretty friendly. I mean, I could cut that ball in and go cross table. So I would say there. And then, it's not exactly, it's something like this. This would be like my idea of the sidewalk zone. I feel that if I land in that zone, I'm like 95% that I'm going to make the 14 and land on the 8 ball. But what if I miss? So then there's outside of that, it gets a little tougher. So for example, if I'm back here, I haven't lost the game from back here, but it's a little testy. And I would say, as I come back to the kitchen line, this gets a little balance beamy. And then as I get a little thicker on the 6 ball, it gets a little balance beamy. And I would say that anything out in here, we're probably like 75%, I don't know, to about here. So that's like a secondary zone where if I'm somewhere out there, I'm probably going to win, but not always. And then everything outside of that, like I start becoming like 50-50. The distance is so great, but I'm too flat, I'm too thin, I'm too long, and it's not a hard drop. Maybe there's some 80-85%, or maybe it drops from 75% down to 60-65. It's not like, it doesn't plummet immediately. It's a little gradual. But in my mind, I don't want to be in the kitchen. What do you think of those zones, Chris? Does that look like, would you agree with those zones, or is there something
I would completely agree, and I do have to highlight a comment that you just got from your drawings. This is from Brian Lowell. He says, is it supposed to look like a coffin? I suppose your zones kind of resemble the shape of a coffin. And I will say the answer is yes, because if you land in the coffin, your opponent is dead.
That's right. That's for your opponent, man. We want to cut their heart out. We want them to we want them to not even be able to drive past their local bar anymore because they have like flashbacks of how badly you beat them. Correct.
So I want to make sure, I want to elaborate a little bit because I know there might be some viewers out there that think about this. Technically, is there anything wrong with landing straight in on the 14 ball? No, because you can shoot it in. You can shoot it in, and you can attempt to get on the short side of the 8 ball. So technically speaking, that is an option. What you'll realize though, if you tend to stick to that option, you will actually realize how difficult it is to land on the short side of the 8 ball. You might be too scared and hit it too soft, and you end up with a super thin cut shot on the short side. You might over-roll it and scratch. You might end up hitting the short rail and then bouncing off, and you're still back to having a super thin cut shot on the 8 ball.
And that assumes you don't have the angle. That assumes, Chris, you don't have the angle where you're following towards the 8 like this.
Correct.
And then you're really dead. Now you can't even play short side.
Correct. What I want to make sure people know and understand is that even though the shot is makeable, again, understanding the transition and the amount of effort it takes to hit the transition in order for you to be able to make your next shot. When you look at these zones that we're talking about, yes, for some, shooting the 14 in from those zones might be a little difficult. That does mean you probably need to practice shooting from those types of angles, but you'll realize how natural it is that you can actually, 1, make the shot, and then 2, land in the bigger zone for the 8 ball in the same corner. Just want to make sure that point gets emphasized.
100%. So everybody's got a different skill set. If somebody's not able to cut balls down rails and control their cue ball, then obviously you got to do what's best for you. But long term, I'm speaking to a wide audience, so I'm just doing my best. Okay, so here's our target. So now let's go back to where they had a shot at the 9. If we take the time to draw that target out, now there's 2 ways to get there. We can soft roll the 9 in and just hold to the narrow end of the zone here by just trickling forward a little bit. If for some reason we're uncomfortable with that, suppose the 9 ball was a little further and the cue ball is a little ways back like this, the other option is we could follow all the way to the side rail and then back out to here. So either one's okay. What's not okay is rolling the 9 in and bouncing out and getting here and then walking around the table and realizing, I thought this rack was over, but things just got a little funny. So the reason I call this game, this invisible blockers, is if we were playing 8 ball, if the 6 ball was right here, so that people physically could see that ball was blocking the 14, I guarantee, let's make up a player's name, Randy. There's a guy named Randy. He's at the table. I guarantee if Randy was shooting this 9 ball in, he would walk around the table and figure out how far off the rail he'd have to be to clear the 6. I know he would. And he would probably cross the line and run the balls out. But if I take the 6 ball down, Randy just gets up to the table and says, oh, this is all over. Just tap, 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 run him out. And he's going to bounce out and get a funny angle on the 14 and rattle the 14 trying to get shape. So this haunts me, guys. I'm sorry. I know we've taken 45 minutes talking about this, but that's because, but think about it. Why should this player's run-out percentage get better if I put a blocker ball there? Why should that make him, like, with the blocker ball there, he can physically see it, and so then he works around it. But you take the blocker ball away, and he just plays himself a funny angle, rattles the ball, and doesn't run out? Like, if this was once, guys, if it was one player on one shot, I wouldn't be doing this. I'm talking, I do this full-time. I see this week after week. I get to, you guys want to get better. I'm telling you guys, target visualization might be the biggest league in people's pool games. And, you can watch all the videos you want on power draws or on how to straighten your stroke, but none of that's going to help if you leave yourself bad angles because you don't take the time to walk around the table. So all of this could be avoided. There was one gentleman that mentioned that it's, I think Simpson mentioned that it was process-based. It's a process. So here's what we do is on every shot, we're going to take the time to draw out our sidewalk zone and our balance beam zone. Well, we're going to draw out our sidewalk zone. And then if we know we can hit the sidewalk zone, we're good. If we don't know that we can hit the sidewalk zone, then we add the balance beam zone to give ourselves extra landing room. So any comments on this before I click this one away?
The only thing I see so far comes from Matthew. He is expressing that these live streams that we're doing are very helpful.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate it. I really do. We had fun. We did an 8-ball one a few months ago, and somebody requested 9-ball. I have a plan for a 9-ball one too coming up, but this is where we had to start because this is pretty important. So okay, let's look at another one. We've got one here with the 3-6-8. 3-6-8. Can everybody see the 3-6-8?
Yep.
All right. This one's not going to. Now these aren't going to take us long. We are playing. We're playing 8-ball, and we would like to shoot the 3, then the 6, then the 8. Let's just assume that's the order we're going to run these in, and we're somewhat full on the 3-ball, but not straight in, so we can follow the end rail and back out. So, what we would like to do is, of course, here's the shot line on the 6-ball. So after making the 3. If we come up and cross the shot line where our cue ball ends up back over here, well, now it's going to be more difficult to get shape on the 8. So I think most players understand that. And so they would want to be on this side of the shot line so that they can cut the 6-ball and float like a butterfly lightly to the foot rail or the head rail. Okay, good. So what's going to go wrong, though? And what's going to go wrong is they are too vague. So they have this idea of where they want to be, but they're going to shoot the 3-ball in, and because it's a full hit, the cue ball is going to move kind of sluggish. It doesn't have any leftover energy, and they're going to be a little nervous because it's a long shot, right? It's a long shot, and so you got a long shot. You're a little nervous. Maybe you don't stroke through it very much. And the cue ball is going to react a little sluggish, and the cue ball is going to follow down and come up to here, where you're going to have a shot at the 6, but it's going to be so thin that your cue ball is going to be racing to the head rail, and you're not going to be able to play shape for the 8. And then you're either going to have to try to go up and down twice, or you're going to miss the 6, try to power it, go up, and it's not where you want to be. Because that player had a vague idea of where they wanted to be, which is on this side of the shot line where they can make the 6. But they didn't really dial it in. So now we're going to take the time to walk around the table, and we're going to draw our sidewalk zone. Here's how you do it. You say, where would I love to be? Right here. How far back? Well, I don't want to be frozen on the rail, so how about there? Okay. How much straighter? Well, I don't want to be straight. I need an angle so I can at least follow to here with some left spin. So I wouldn't want to be any straighter than that. Fantastic. And I'm good on that line all the way to here. How much thinner can I be? Boy, I wouldn't really want to be much thinner than about, I don't know, this. That seems reasonable. Anything less than that starts becoming a tough shot. And I guess we're probably good. Let's see if I can draw my coffin. Okay, I would say that's my sidewalk zone. If I land in this zone, I'm highly confident that I will run the 6-8. Now, where's my balance beam zone? Because I'm not always going to hit that zone. I'm shooting from distance. I have to move my cue ball a long way. So then I ask myself, like, okay, if I miss this zone, well, I don't want to miss on this side. This is kind of a hard stop. But if I'm a little longer, if I happen to get near the rail, I'm probably okay. And I'm probably okay being a little longer or a little thinner. So, like, that's probably balance beam zone. Meaning, if I landed there, I'm probably okay, but I would rather be up here. Great. So now when I shoot this, in my mind, this is like a line I have to get to. And I'm not just thinking I'm going to shoot the 3 and bounce off the end rail and get somewhere and it's going to work out. I am well aware, guys, that this line right here, that like I have to cross that line. But if I want to win the game, I've got to cross that. I'm sorry. This thing is, I have to cross that line. So when I shoot the 3, I'm going to make sure I hit it smooth and firm enough to get to that line. And if I'm worried that it's going to bounce more towards the 6, if I have an angle where the cue ball wants to come this way, then if the cue ball wants to come towards the 6, well, then I'm gonna use a touch of inside. Yeah, you can say that makes the shot tougher, but like what makes it's going to be a lot more pleasant than shooting from the spot on the 6 ball. So this is the zone. This is what it looks like, and this is how you create a zone. Where do you want to be? How far back? How far to each side? Do you like it? And then if you're not 100% sure you can hit it, where could you where does it's like a golf course. It doesn't, it's like, there's like I don't know, people read the greens or whatever. I don't do any of this. Maybe this is a bad example, but it's like the pool table. It's like you got your sweet spot that you want to be. Then you got your secondary zone where it's like playable. And then you got outside of that, it's like where you need to stay away from. That's how you create zones. It's not hard. Make sense?
Makes sense to me.
All right, Chris, why don't you do one? Oh. This one, I actually got to move this. I forgot. All right. So, talk to me about position on the 7 ball. We're trying to run the balls out in order.
So is the angle on the 6 to where I will?
You know what? Let me. You got ball in hand on the 6, my friend. You get to do what you want to do. How about that?
Okay, that's even better. Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to, because I should have the ability to do this. I'm going to bring up a drawing tool on my side that allows me to draw on the screen. You won't see what I'm drawing, but the viewers will. And then when you start drawing, I'd be curious to know if it's going to match up with what you're drawing.
Well, why don't you go ahead and draw it? Why don't you take over for a minute so people can hear somebody else's voice?
All right. So what I'm thinking about is clearly the 6 ball is going to go over here. And so if we think about the shot line, I know I'm not drawing straight here. So with ball in hand, I would come over here and plan about the 7. Here's the shot line here. So that way I got to get somewhere over here. That
Chris,
way
I can't see your screen. Can everybody else?
Yeah, no, you can't see what I'm drawing, but the viewers can. And so when you start drawing, we'll see if it lines up with what I'm drawing.
Okay.
Then look at this. Okay. So landing on this side of the 7 ball is no good. Landing on this side of the 8 ball is no good. Or it's okay, but landing on this side would be better, in my opinion. So that means that when I think about the target zone for the 7, I would probably say that I would want to be somewhere. Let's see if I can draw a coffin as good as Demetrius does. Probably not. I think that might be the balance beam zone. Or no, I'm sorry, the sidewalk zone. And then I'll use a different color for... Let's see, something like... And then I think somewhere right around there would probably be that. Now, as far as the 8 ball is concerned, I'm just going to draw a sidewalk zone. I would probably want to be somewhere... Actually, just a second. Let me get this. I probably would want to be somewhere... Maybe like that. So the viewers can see what I've drawn. And basically, some common sense stuff. I want to be in between the 7 and the 9 after I shoot the 6. We'll see where your zones end up. And I definitely do not want to be near the short rail, even though I could, because if I get on the short rail on the 8 ball, I can kind of stun my cue ball down there, maybe even float it to the short rail. But I'd rather use the short rail as the rebound to transition back to the other end of the table. So when it comes to position on the 8, I'm somewhere near the rack area.
Okay, so let me. I'll start by drawing like my position zone on the 8 ball. So I think that I'm probably playing to be above it. The thickest I'd want to be on the 8 ball, I'd want at least a half ball hit angle where I could use a low outside 2-railer to kind of pull the cue ball 1-2 rails back up table for the 9. So the thickest I'd want to probably be is like this line here. And then, yeah, there's some, okay, so then we'll talk about something in a second. And I actually could be fairly thin. Like the cue ball could be all the way to here. And I would have a natural 1-rail angle to just roll this 8 ball in with like high ball, high center, maybe even high with a half tip of right. Does that look something like yours?
Pretty close. Your zone is a little bit bigger than mine, but I was fairly close. Fairly close.
Good. Yeah, yeah. And then the funny part is, guys, by the way, this zone would also work down here, but there's a problem. This zone works too. The problem is, if somebody was in their mind thinking, well, I'm just going to shoot the 7 and float up and hit one of those two zones. If there was a 12 ball here, right? See the blocker? I made it visible for you guys. You wouldn't want to be anywhere behind that 12 ball. Well, just because the 12 ball's not there physically doesn't mean it's not there in spirit. Because if you land anywhere between these two lines, you're going to have a real hard time getting shape for the 9. So anybody when they're looking at the 8 ball zone, if they're just thinking, well, somewhere past this line, I'm sure I'll be fine. No, nope. There's an invisible blocker. Treat it like the 15 is there, or is that 12, whatever ball I just used. Treat it like there's a ball right there. If you don't see how bad this is, yeah, well, okay. So these are the two zones. So this is why Chris said you can't play for down here. Not only it's nicer to come off the end rail. Well, you could play for down here. I mean, if the 7 was hanging in the corner, maybe you would accept that angle. But you're not going to move the cue ball 6 feet and land on a dime, so you can't play for that zone. Okay, similarly, let's talk about the 7 ball zone. This is actually interesting because this is not bad on the 7. The reason this isn't bad on the 7 is because you can roll this in with right spin, come 1, 2, 3 rails, and creep right down this line. So it turns out there are a couple places on the 7 ball you could be. And anywhere here along this line, I'd feel totally comfortable getting this zone. And I'd be fine. Here's the funny part. I could do that from here too. I could just stun the ball with a tip of right and come 3 rails around. Now I know that shot really well. Everybody's got their own cue ball tools, right? So not nobody hits that shot better than I do. So I know how to play my cue ball 3 rails down that line from here. Now from thicker than that, now I could roll this ball in with high ball and a tip of left and float 1 rail across the line. And that would be fine as well. So therefore, anywhere from here to here, this isn't necessarily where I'd play shape for. I'm just saying all of this works for me. This is all sidewalk for me on the 7 ball. Because I can either come around this way or I can follow 1 rail across. Now, on the other side of the 7 ball, we're good. Like Chris is saying, this is fine right here.
Oh.
I wouldn't want to be longer and thinner than that. And then I'm good all the way out to about here. I don't want to be over the 9 ball. Okay, so that's my sidewalk zones for the 7. So there's 2 of them. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because I had a student here a couple of weeks ago, and really, 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 really good guy, smart guy, sharp as a tack. And I was talking to him about the 7 ball zone, because this came up at one of our runs. And he waved his arm over this whole swath of table and said, well, anywhere out here is fine. Because here, you can just float directly up table, and here you can just follow 1 rail across. And I said, yeah, but what if you get dead straight in? And he looked at that, and he's like, oh, that would be bad. I'm like, right. So therefore, you can't just say anywhere out here is fine if anywhere out here isn't fine. And again, here's our 12 ball, here's our invisible blocker. When we need to move the cue ball, we need an angle. And so you have to play shape on the 7 as if there's a 12 ball there. We can't just take ball in hand, roll the 6, and float somewhere on this half the table. We have to understand that there's dead zone in there. And the way that you find that dead zone is by walking around the table and asking yourself, like, where would you like to be? How far back? How far to each side? And then there's always a spot at which it gets ugly. And you're like, ooh, well, let's not put the cue ball there. And it sounds, I don't know, to me, this sounds like we're talking about really boring, obvious stuff. Everybody's like, when do we get to work on our draw shots? All I know is week after week, I watch people land on dead zones. And I scratch my head. I'm like, well, this is where people lose the racks. And if you got ball in hand in a game, think about this for a minute. If you got ball in hand and you put it down where you were hooked, like that would be really weird, right? Like, why would you take ball in hand and put it somewhere where you don't have a shot? Well, this is only one level above it. People have ball in hand on the 6 ball. They shoot it in and roll their cue ball somewhere, and then they walk around and hate their angle. And they're like, well, I didn't want to be here. It's like, well, you just put it there. You just put it there. Why did you put it there? And I do a drill, you know, the no rail drill. You can't hit a rail. You have to be real accurate on your cue ball. if I had a nickel, guys, and I know I've been talking a lot, so I'm winding down here, but if I had a nickel for every time somebody took ball in hand, shot a stop shot, and then walked around the table and shook their head because they didn't like where they were, I'm like, you literally shot a stop shot. You just put it there. How could that not work? So I've been watching this for years. This is the biggest league in people's games. It's boring, but you got to do it at every shot. And we're going to talk about how to make it easier, how to make it rhythmic. We're going to try to talk about how to actually integrate this in your game, but you got to do it. Cool. All right. I had another example. Does this look like what your zone was down here?
Yeah, so I erased all my drawings because I got discouraged when you drew when you drew the zone for the 3-rail route, because I didn't think about the 3-rail route. But your second zone does kind of match the zone that I drew for getting on the other side in between the 7 and the 9, so that way you can float down for the 8. So I at least get some points on that one. I just didn't even think about the 3-rail shape from the 7 to the 8.
For sure. And by the way, there's an interesting question. I don't know if anyone asked it. How come I didn't draw balance beam zones this time? Notice I didn't draw balance beam zones this time. Well, the reason why is because I can hit one of these 2 zones.
Yeah, the zones are so big, the accuracy, the probability of hitting them should be relatively high.
Right. So, like, suppose the 6 ball was here, and I have ball in hand. Well, I'm going to stop inside of the sidewalk zone. So I don't need to draw a balance beam zone, because why? I know I'm going to hit my sidewalk zone. So, guys, I don't always draw a balance beam zone. The question is, can I hit my target? And if the answer is yes, I just hit it. But if the answer is I'm not sure if I could hit that little target, then I start thinking about where, if I missed a sweet spot, what does the rest of the terrain look like? Where's my secondary landing? So, should we try this on a table in real time?
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure everybody would love to see demo, because we do have a question from Gregory Scott, because he does want to know, how are you hitting each ball to get to the zone? And that's where the live demonstration is going to come from.
So, yeah. Well, here's the thing. Think about if you're playing pool when it comes to pocketing balls. There's 2 parts of pocketing a ball. Figuring out where you want to hit the object ball and actually delivering the cue ball there. So, where do I aim? How do I hit where I'm aiming? So, where do you aim? It comes from looking at the pocket, visualizing the line of the shot, the ball going towards that pocket, and then using, looking at the contact point, and then using some combination of ghost ball or parallel lines or center to edge or some kind of experience and feel. But somehow we have to kind of pick our spot to aim, right? Then once we've picked our spot to aim, then the other half of the equation is hitting that spot. And that comes from fundamentals, from our stroke, from our sighting, from our stance, from our grip, from our striking. Finding the spot, hitting the spot, finding the spot, hitting the spot. Well, targets and cue ball and patterns are the same thing. Creating targets, hitting targets, creating targets, hitting targets, creating targets, hitting targets. So there's been a lot of discussion about how to hit targets. There's a lot of discussion about how to play your cue ball. A lot of videos out there on stop shots, on draw shots, on side spin shots, on different multi-rail routes. That is your toolbox to hit the targets. What I'm here to do is help you with the visualization of the targets. So I'm not really getting into so much. It'll come up at, of course, I'll tell you how I'm hitting shots. But in the end, we can only take one bite at a time. And I'm here to talk about seeing the right spot. It's almost like we're talking about aiming tonight, not striking. Yep. So let's look at a table real quick. All right. So I want to talk about how I do this in real time, because we're going to. So let's just be clear. If I just have to make the 7 and then pocket the 2, if I make the 7-2, I win. Well, I'm not going to walk around the table, put my tip down, start drawing boxes on the table. I don't need to do all that, because I can see from where I'm standing. From where I'm standing, I can see. I'd be comfortable shooting the 2 from right where my tip is. I can see that from here. So I know that all of this area is totally fine. And I know I can hit that area. So therefore, I'm just going to play my cue ball to bump the rail. I don't need to walk around and, spend 30 seconds of my opponent's time drawing boxes. On the other hand, if I needed to make the 7 and then make the 2, and then I needed to get shape like we did earlier on this ball here. Well, now I want to make sure I have the right angle. So I would walk around the table and I would just say, I need to get at least this far off the rail, no further back than here. And I wouldn't want to be thinner than this. So now I just drew that line as the back of my box. And now, okay, I almost shot. And the reason I almost shot is because I can see from where I'm standing that anywhere inside of this cone that's not frozen on the rail, I can already see. I didn't walk around the table because it's clear to me. I hope it's clear to you too. Anywhere I can make this four ball from here. I don't want to be thinner than that. I don't want to be frozen. So anywhere from here to here that's not the corner pocket is good. So I'm playing to come across somewhere in here and bump off the second rail. So I didn't walk around the table and agonize, right? I made the shot. I almost just got down a shot because I can already see that from where I'm standing. Two on the side. That was close. For a minute, I thought that wasn't close. Okay, let's look at some other shots.
Actually, Demetrius, just for argument's sake, could you demonstrate getting flat on the second to last ball and trying to roll on the short side of that same exact layout?
Yeah.
Just so that if anybody's watching, they'll get the idea.
This is really bad. Yeah, now you're banking at the side pocket again.
He almost made it. Oh my goodness. But I hope everybody at least understands that. Are there times where you can get nice and flat on the second to last ball and roll to a nice shot on the short side? Of course there are. But again, if you experiment with the other one, that might be a little bit more difficult for you. You'll realize how many more times you could successfully not only make the shot, but then easily transition to the final shot.
Okay, so here's a spot that comes up like true. This is absolutely true. You can't make this up, Chris. This is why I'm doing the video. And if you guys can understand what I'm about to say, please help me stay sane. I swear to you, I've had people do this where they're playing 8-ball. They want to shoot the 5, 7, 8. And they get down with ball in hand and they shoot the 5 and they end up straight on the 7. And then you know what they tell me is they say, man, I was wanting to get on this side of the 7 ball so I could get down for the 8. So this is where the invisible blockers come in. Okay, I'm sorry. So I'm like a silhouette. Starbush, can you do the fandango? Okay. You can't see my eyes, but I'm looking dead into your eyes out there in YouTube land. I implore you. I beg you. I hear this all the time where people roll the ball in and then they say, man, I meant to cross the shot line so I could get to the end ring. So here's my question. Why didn't they cross the shot line? Were they really unable to? Like if this 9 ball was here, if that 9 ball was there blocking off straight in, do you really think that they would have gotten there? Do you think that if this 9 ball was here, do you really think they would have rolled the 1 in and put themselves behind the 9? I mean, maybe somebody would, but I wouldn't. So how come they can't see it? So here's the deal. You have to treat it like that blocker's there. Because if you pretend the blocker's there, then you won't get behind it. And then you can jack up one-handed it. No, okay. The point is, guys, this is why I did the video. It's because I know for a fact that if that 9 ball had been there, that my student would have got across the shot line. But because it wasn't there, they just had this vague idea. Well, I'll roll over and I'm sure I'll get where I want to be. But they didn't take the time to walk around the table, look at the shot line, think about how far they could go, and then play to cross that and land in that zone. Okay. We gotta do it. So what should we do? 5 ball runs and 9 ball?
Sure. Let's put you on the spot and let's make you do. You're playing the 5-ball ghost.
Well,
maybe the 4-ball ghost.
I could roll this out softly, but I'm stubborn. All right.
There we go.
My eyes are on you. Okay, so this looks fairly open. So let's talk zones real quick. In the end, I'd like to play shape for this. So guys, we're getting a little bit into was a future videos, how to run 9-ball racks. I'll give you some 9-ball rack. This is all free stuff, okay? This is all like not really our main point. We don't read racks in order from the front to the end. We don't think about how we're going to shoot the 5 and get on the 6, then how we're going to get on the 7. We don't start from the beginning to the end. Nor do we work our way back and say, here's where I want to be at the 9, here's where I want to be at the 8. So we don't go chronologically or reverse chronologically. We read racks in the order of priority. And the way I look at this, there's one priority in this rack that stands out. And here's why I say this. If I can run the 5-6 and end up good on the 7, I'm very, very, very high percentage to make the 7, make the 8, make the 9. If I can get here, I'm really, really, really high percentage. I'm almost always going to run the 7, 8, 9. And if you were giving me the 6-ball, like all I had to do was make the 5-6, I'm very, very high percentage to make the 5-6. In fact, I'll use the words always. I'll always make the 5-6. And if I land good on the 7, I'll always make the 7, 8, 9. So to me, this isn't really a 5-ball run. To me, the whole game is pivoting from the 6 to the 7. That's the whole game. If I could make after shooting the 6, I end up good on the 7, I win. If after making the 6, I'm bad on the 7, I might lose. So it's just one pivot. So how are we going to make the pivot? Here's our shot line. We're going to be playing for the 6 on the side. And we have a decision to make. I either have to get on this side of the shot line to maybe follow one rail across, or I have to be on this side of the shot line and pull like a stun over. Now, I hear people saying, why not play the 7-8 combination? It's doable, but the problem is if I play the combination, there's some funny things that can happen where the 7 could like chip off and freeze on one of the end rail or freeze on the side rail, or I can lay funny on it. So I don't want to mess with it if I don't have to. And in this case, I don't really have to. So Chris, should I play for this side or this side? And how can I decide?
Let's see here. So the simple answer, well, I don't think this is a simple answer, because we're thinking about skill sets, because there's something you used to talk about to where there's your target and then there's your gun. And so which gun can you use to hit your target? So my target is going to be on the right side of your cue stick. So anywhere near the rack area.
That's 100% right. That's 100% right.
But if anybody is betting on, they can be on the left side because they have a gun that they and I say gun meaning that the way they can shoot the shot and their muscle memory is superb and stuff, and they just know how to move the cue ball on the left side of the shot line to get to the 7. But for me, it's about being on the right side of the 6 shot line, so that way I can float down for the 7 in the upper right corner.
100% right. It depends on where the 5 was. If the 5 was over here, then we might play for the other side. But since the 5 ball's already on this side, we're just going to stay on this side. So what I'm going to do is draw my zone. This is very important. I ask myself.
Give me an outline and I can draw it for you.
Yep, I'm doing it right now. So this is the thickest I could be is on this line here. I just put a penny. That's about as far back as I want to be.
Okay.
The thinnest I could be is about here. If I get thinner than this, the cue ball is going to be coming pretty hot. Now that's a pretty small target. What makes it possible is that my cue ball, I'm sure, and the 5 ball so close, I can roll forward. So what I started doing is I started asking myself, how am I going to hit that target? And if I have to stun into the target, it could get a little dicey. But maybe if I just roll it in and accept a little bit more distance here, maybe I can accept a little more distance just to make sure I have the right angle. And then to get on the 7 ball, by the way, here is the thinnest I want to be on this side. Here's the thinnest I want to be on the other side, probably. So I'm kind of trying to play into this triangle here. Okay. Now, I will add one thing. If I was going to miss this zone, I would rather miss it here and possibly follow over for a combo, as opposed to missing it here, where I might actually miss the 7 to the 6 ball. It would be better to get full on the 5 and switch patterns than to play myself hopelessly on a line. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So does everyone see the 2 zones? All right. So then I'll just try to dribble this in and just sneak past that. I'm drawing the edge of my zone. That's the edge of my zone. It's right here. So I'm kind of visualizing that right now. Now,
Beautiful.
I'm not going to go to autopilot and assume the game is over. If I stop, I'm a little bit stretched out and the 8 ball's hanging, which is a little bit annoying. It's deep. These are diamond shells. So I could roll forward a little bit and then play maybe rail first off the 8. And now I'm always drawing zones. Once I'm past the, I don't know, I'm going to play like the 3rd diamond line. And I don't want to be inside the kitchen. I feel like once I clear the kitchen, in my mind, I'm already seeing it off the rail, outside the kitchen. Now, if that didn't look like much, good. It's not supposed to. Okay. I'm going to do 1 or 2 racks. No, you know what? Let's do another one. Let's do another one. But you see, you hit one target, make one pivot, and then you just tap them in. Okay. This one's kind of tricky. Let me just move the 9 out so that I have open shots. Okay, here we go. Pretty tough little run. Pretty tough little run. So, again, guys, in the chat, let's see if people can identify. What's the hard part of this rack? There's like one part of this rack that's tough.
What he's referring to, you've heard me say this plenty of times in some of my older videos. We're looking for what Demetrius likes to call the key transition. The shot that involves the transition to the next ball, to where if you hit this transition, you're more than likely going to run out. Yes, there's always the possibility that you can still screw up, but more than likely you should be able to get out if you can hit this key transition. And what is that key transition? Is it from the 3 to the 4? Is it from the 4 to the 5? The 5 to the 6? The 6 to the 7? Or the 7 to the 9? I mean, those are your options. And sometimes layouts can have more than one, but I think in this one you are referring to that there's only one key transition?
Yeah, I really feel like there's just one transition in this rack.
Okay. And our first answer comes from Trevor Simpson. He's saying from the 4 to the 5.
Trevor, you're my man. All right, me and you, we're going to do great things together. So this is actually a really tough rack, because if I get thin on this side of the 4 ball, I could crash into the 7. But if I get thin on this side, I could either roll and I'm crashing into the 9, or if I stun the cue ball past the 9, now I'm coming multiple rails across the shot line. I can't get hooked on the 6, but if I go too far, I'm too thin on the 5. So I really don't want to be playing 2 rails around. It's too hard to hit the target on the 5 ball. If we wanted to define what the target on the 5 ball is, here we go. I wouldn't want to be thinner on this side of the 5 than this. I wouldn't want to be thicker. There's a death angle where I'm full on the 5. And if I shoot it, my cue ball's sliding this way, but I can't really play shape. It's an awkward angle. So I would either want to be out here on the 5 with enough angle to like follow to the rail and out, somewhere out in this zone here. Or there's another zone where I'm back cutting the 5, like this, and I can shoot and stun out. So there's a little area for the 5 ball here, and a little area for the 5 ball here. And so if I come 2 rails, I'm cutting across those targets. It's real tough. So the problem is, though, I can't be above the 4 because the 9 ball, and I can't be below the 4 because the 7 ball. So this is really awkward. I'm trying to figure out how to hit one of those 2 targets on that 5 ball. So what I'm thinking is, best thing I can do is play to get fairly full on the 4 over here. If I get fortunate, I can pick up this angle to follow the cue ball 2 rails towards the 5. This would be sweet because then I'm coming right down the line I want, and I have a very good chance of hitting my target. So the thinnest I could be on the 4, I'm looking at like, if I'm here, now I'm following into the 9 ball. So this is too thin. This is as thick as thin as I can be and still follow past the 9. The problem is, this is straight in. So if I play to get, I can't risk getting here. So then I got to ask myself, I'm not going to land on that dime. If I had a ball on hand, we would have already run these balls. I would prefer to miss this ball and get straight in. And miss this target, because if I'm straight, I might just cinch the 4, back the cue ball up here so I'm not over the 9, and accept distance on the 5 ball just to make sure I have a good angle on. So because this is so tricky, and even if I'm a little bit below the shot line here, I'm still thick enough to draw past the 7. So what I've done is I've created a zone where I don't want to be thin on either side. So I just want to play to get fullish. If I'm straight, I rock it straight back. If I'm a little bit past the shot line, I rock it towards the 5. And if I'm a little bit above the shot line, I follow 2 rails towards the 5. Once I make the pivot up to the 5 and put the 5 ball down, the rest of the game is routine. So then the next question is, well, how do I hit this target? And Chris, you and I know, we just did a video review on this one, the needle span. There's 100 ways to go, but we can just do this and pull our cue ball to the 3rd diamond with a little bit of a stun, with just a touch of stun draw to it. They have a little bit below the shot line. So now I have to try to pull past the 7. Now, there's a tendency, somebody mentioned it earlier, I just kind of won the rack. But now is when I have to regroup, and instead of just shooting the 5 and getting funny on the 6, I'm creating my target. Straight is okay, I can stop. A little bit, I want to be thinner on the 6 than this. I don't want to be racing up table. I don't want to be thinner than this on the other side where the 6 becomes tough to pocket. So I draw my zone. Same story here. I don't want to be with that. I don't want to be where the 6 is, where it's hard to get on the 9. I guess here I can stun over. This is like the thickest I want to be. It's right where the 6 is. So I'm going to play my cue ball right to where the 6 is and then rock past. Put the touch on the inside, just for all the CJ Wiley fans. Okay, so I'll tell you guys, that was actually a tougher run than it looked like. But I want you guys to see that once you get past a certain level of striking, 9 ball is not a series of balls to pocket. 9 ball is a couple of targets you have to hit with your cue ball. And if you can hit those targets to make the key pivots you need to make, the rest of the rack just melts. And then it looks like you just run racks all day. So it's just finding and hitting those key targets.
So we do have some discussion that occurred about this one here.
Let's go to it. Let's okay, I'm grabbing a chair. Let's resume our conversation.
And I'm going to jump back in on this one here, so everybody should be able to see me. So if you remember the layout, it was all talking about going from the 3 to the 4, and we saw how you transitioned from the 3 to the 4 with kind of a stun draw shot coming off the long rail to go into the shot line of the 4 ball. So
Right.
when you were talking about how small that zone was getting to the 4 ball, Loping CSF did mention everything that you were saying is why he thought the 3 to the 4 was probably going to be the key transition, because if you don't get there, then everything screws up. So I'm going to guess that your counter answer to this question is because you have ball in hand on the 3 ball. If you didn't have ball in hand on the 3 ball, then it's something completely different. So even with ball in hand, yeah, that zone was small. Depending upon your gun, depending upon your skill set, hitting that small zone is going to be difficult for some. But the distinction here is because we are starting with ball in hand. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so 100%. So here's another way to think about this. Which ball, suppose you had ball in hand of the 3, and suppose your money ball was the wild 3 ball. Somebody was spotted. All you had to do to win was make ball in hand. Well, you're 100% to make ball in hand. Okay, now let's pretend that your money ball was the 4 ball. In order to win, you don't have to get shape on the 5. All you have to do is make the 3 and then pocket the 4. Well, the way those balls were sitting, if all you had to do was make the 3-4, I would assume you're like 95% to make the 3-4. Now, let's suppose your money ball was the 5 ball and you had to make the 3-4-5. All of a sudden, boy, your run out percentage might drop to like 50-50 or 70% because, man, is it tough to get on that 5. So here's the way I look at which one the key transition is which is the ball that's the first ball that I need to reach where my run out percentage starts dropping. So I know I'm going to make the 3 with ball in hand. I know I'm going to be able to get a shot and pocket the 4. But being able to get on the 5 and pocket the 5, that's where my percentage is nosedive from 99%. So that's where the key transition is. Now, to your point, because getting on the 5, what made getting on the, let's think about this. What makes getting on the 4 ball tough is that it was a small zone. And the reason that getting on the 4 ball was a small zone was because the 4 to the 5 was a key transition. So if the 5 was hanging in another pocket, the 4 ball zone would have been huge because the 5 ball zone would have been huge. So the 4 ball zone being as small as it was only because the 4 to the 5 was the key transition. And to Chris's point, yeah, it is a transition, but it was a manageable transition, like he said, because we had ball hand. Anyway, good discussion. You know, and there's not always it's not like there's right and wrong. It's more a matter of priority. Like, how much priority do we have to give these things in our attention? So
now the caveat to that scenario, because we do have a couple of suggestions. Well, what about short side on the 4 ball where that 7 ball?
I thought about it. So that's a very, very good. Let's go back to the table and let's take a look at something real quick here. Whoever suggested that, trust me, I looked at it. So let me just create something similar. It's not going to be the same. Close. It's close. So there are worlds. He was saying, what if we shot the 3 in this corner and followed our cue ball up to this side? And then once I'm here, I've got a nice natural angle to play my cue ball 2 rails up this way. So here's where I looked at this. So let's examine this. I can't be hooked beyond the 8. And I don't want to be so thin on the 4 that it's a real hard shot and hard to control my cue ball. So I have to get at least to here. But then I don't want to be, if I get straight in and I realize I'm shooting the 3, I'm kind of going to be near the rail. I don't want to be straight in where I have to elevate and spear this and pull back and get a funny long shot in the 5. So that's a pretty small target because I don't want to really be straight. And there's also an even worse angle where I'm not quite straight. And now if I draw back, it's like now I'm straight to here, where if I draw back, I'm going to be real long, but if I try to force the ball forward, it's going to be real hard because I'm near the rail. So I don't want to have this dead angle. It's almost like there's an invisible blocker here and I don't want to get here. So I would want to be somewhere between about here and about here. And this is about a handspan. It's a little bit tight. It's a little bit tight. And what I would say is I looked at this, and if these balls, if this 4 ball was just a little bit, like, if this was just a little bit different, I think I would maybe play it that way. But it was just a little bit tight. But we'll try it. I thought about it. So I draw my line, I got to cross. True diamond 2.5. This is just a little flat on the rail. I can't draw because I'm near the rail. And now I can't, now I've got to follow 2 rails around with a force follow hit from near the rail. This is very difficult. And now I'm crossing my line with a 5 ball. This is exactly what I was afraid of.
Ah, beautiful.
Sometimes you make a recovery shot, but that was balance beat. That was very balance beat. Uh-oh, a little weak. Okay, so that's okay, a little weak. But no, it's a good thought. It was a very serious consideration. Yeah.
Well, hopefully everybody saw Demetrius, because I did draw the short side zone while you were illustrating it. And the main thing is, that's why I was saying, when you look at the distinction between the two, both shots you have ball in hand, but I think we all knew and understood that the other side, that zone was bigger versus the short side zone. So comparatively, when you think about it, how often are you going to hit the smaller zone, even with ball in hand, versus the other zone that, yes, it is smaller, or it is a small zone, but it's bigger than the smaller zone. That's what you have to find your balance.
The other thing to think about too is, if I miss the zone on the other side, where I'll always have an easy shot on the 4. Now, sometimes I get an angle where I'm running into the 7. Sometimes I get an angle where I'm running into the 9. Sometimes I get an angle where I have to stun around 2 rails, crossing the shot line of the 5. It's a little tricky, but I'm always going to have an easy shot. But if I play short side, I might end up flat on the rail with a tough force follow, or I might end up really thin, where I'm like uncomfortably thin. And all of a sudden, it's hard even to make the ball. So if I have a choice, a fork in the road, I'd rather go the route where, if I get into trouble, I still have an easy shot and I have a chance to recover with my cue ball, versus because in other words, the 3, if I play for the 4 in the friendly pocket, the 4 is always going to be easy. And now it's a question of, does it get dicey or not on the 5 ball? But if I play the other way, it can get dicey on the 4 ball just to make the 4 ball. So I want to at least, I'm trying to avoid the risk of coming up with a tough shot. If I dog it the other way, I still have a chance to hit a good recovery and avoid any hard shots at all. Yep.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So here's an interesting question. And I would actually be curious if you're able to answer it. This is from Zach Robbins. He says,
Zach, we roomed together at the Turning Stone 1.5 years ago. How's it going, my man?
He's saying, do people with ADD or ADHD that you've taught, I'm assuming you've taught players that might have that, struggle with zone drawing and then switching back to execution mode?
So that's a fair question. I will tell you this. There's a lot of things that I can't speak to the difficulty of different people's struggles. There might be people that are mentally ill. There's people that are recovering from, ankle surgeries and have trouble walking around the table. Sorry, Chris. I'm taking, okay, shots fired. The point is, we all have our cross to bear in this world. And I have compassion. I can't speak to how difficult it is. All I can speak to is what the game requires. And so if somebody wants to play pool at a high level, the game requires a certain amount of thought and a certain amount of planning. And if it's difficult for somebody, then that's, if they're going to play, then they either have to overcome it or they have to accept that they're not going to play very high level. They can pick a different game, like maybe they play frisbee golf or something. They can, I don't know. It's like something that's not quite as demanding. But I'm just saying, if you don't want to calculate, don't play chess. And pool's a game where, okay, so then the question is, how do you not let it affect your execution? That's a different question. So the best thing we can do is we have to switch. Pool's a game of scotch doubles. where you're thinking, and then the thinker is partnered up with the shooter. And then the thinker is partnered up with the shooter. And the thinker's got a plan, and the shooter's got to shoot.
I like that.
And what I like to tell people is, one of the reasons why people don't plan very well is because people are always working on their shooter. They want their shooter to shoot. I just want my shooter to carry the team. And the thing about it is that when you plan, you can't plan like you're a great shooter. If you plan like you're a great shooter, you're going to be leaving yourself way too much difficulty. So one of the secrets to pool is you have to plan like you're partnered with somebody who's really bad at shooting. You have to plan as if you're a bad shooter. Because that's when you play, like, I'm going to fight. You basically, the planner has to tell his partner, hey, listen, shooter, I know you're not very good, but don't worry about it. I'm going to plan this out. I'm going to draw good targets. I'm going to hit good zones. I'm going to play good cue ball. I'm going to get you good angles and get you good position. I'm going to play you so good position, you're going to have easy shots all day. That's what the planner's got to say to his partner. But on the flip side, the shooter has to smile and say, don't worry, brother. Just give me the edge of the ball. I'll make anything. I'll make everything. So the trick is, a good team, you have to plan like you can't shoot, and then you have to shoot like you don't need a plan. And the question was, how do you switch? So getting back to my original question, which is, why don't people draw boxes? One way to say it is, in an effort to plan like they can't shoot. I'm trying to teach people how to plan like they can't shoot. But then to Zach's point, in an effort of starting to plan like they can't shoot, then maybe so it's almost like you have to go into like not very confident mode. You have to go into like worry mode to plan good. But then if you stay in worry mode, then you can't actually be in worry mode and stay there. Otherwise, you're actually not going to perform. So you have to go into worry mode. You have to worry when you plan, and then you can't worry when you shoot. And that's one of the reasons people don't like to plan, is because they have to go into worry mode and they don't know if they can get back out of it. So they just want to stay in brash, bulldoze, I'll just run the table over mode. And you can't plan very well when you're in that mode. So what Zach asked is not a small question. It's actually one of the hearts of why people don't play this way. So Chris, what is the best way to avoid getting stuck in thinking mode when you need to perform? How do you switch gears? I've got an answer, but I want your answer.
How do you switch gears from planning to execution?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to try to answer this from a straight pool perspective, because I play a lot of straight pool. So when you're thinking about the break shot, shooting in the ball, the outside ball, and then having the cue ball go into the rack. So there's all the planning of, how do you want to hit the cue ball? Where's the cue ball going to strike the rack? You're doing all of that, and then once you're done with all of that, and you've concluded that here's how you're going to hit the cue ball, that's all that matters. How you're going to hit the cue ball, because you're going to line up like, whatever. You're going to assume that you're going to line up correctly. But how you're going to hit the cue ball, you're done planning. Now all that matters is hit the cue ball like whatever it is that you came up with. Don't worry about if the cue ball is going to strike the rack the way you planned it, or because you just came up with your plan, fine. But just go over and do it and see what happens. And so as far as I'm concerned, you've done your planning. But once you've switched to execution mode, your planning should have ended with, here's how I'm going to hit the cue ball in order to create in order to what you plan the results are going to be. So now all I have to do now is hit the cue ball the way I thought about it. And so when I get behind the cue ball, I'm not even thinking about the plan anymore. All I care about is how to hit that cue ball, how soft, how hard, tip of top, whatever. And then I all my focus goes into the cue ball at that point, and not the result of the plan.
So 100%. So here's the way I like to say what Chris was kind of saying, which is, if there was a graph of our brain activity, guys, if there was a graph of our brain activity, we would be thinking, and our brain activity would be like bouncing around, showing all kinds of activity. And then after we decide, once we've answered the questions of what are we going to do, how are we going to hit it, where do we want to go, once we've made up our mind, our brain almost flatlines. We just get to turn off our brain. And we don't need to worry about anything anymore, because all the decision making is over. So the trick is, there's two tricks to doing this. One trick is by practicing this stuff offline, like by practicing this in your home table, by setting up runs and working on these things and learning these things and drawing your boxes. If you practice thinking, the goal is not to practice thinking so that when you're in a tournament, you can think like crazy. You want to practice thinking so it comes more and more naturally and more quickly, so you don't have to work your brain so hard. So like if you're measuring your brain activity, you want to be able to like practice this stuff and see targets so quickly and clearly that you can almost do it quietly without ever having to think too hard in the first place. That's the first part. But the big part is the pre-shot routine, guys. The real secret of the real purpose, in my opinion, the most important part of the pre-shot routine. It is a bedtime routine for your brain. It is a bedtime routine for your brain. I call it a trigger. It's like a hypnotic suggestion. So I've taught pre-shot routine. I teach this. So when I work with students, I tell them the same thing, which is my kids, when my kids were young and we had a fixed routine every night, we would do the same thing every night, where they would have their snack and watch a show, and then they brush their teeth and get in their pajamas, and then we would read a short story, and then they would do this, and then we'd tuck them in. It was like we did the same thing every night. And I never had a problem with my kids at bedtime, because not only did they not even know, they didn't ever ask me for half an hour more, can we stay up late? In their kid minds, it was time for bed. And they didn't know that they could even question it. In their little kid minds, they thought that everybody in the whole world was going to bed right now, because that's just how it works. So when we do our pre-shot, here's how this works. There is a trigger between the thinking and the shooting. And I'll show you guys 3 triggers that you know, as examples. So Zach, if I'm shooting balls, when you're thinking, we got to segregate the thinking and the shooting. So when we're thinking, I do a few things. There's a force field around the table. I don't do this stuff when I'm thinking like this. This is my shooting stance. So when I'm thinking, I'm standing tall, away from the table. My bridge hand is not on my cue stick like this. This is like nervous shooting energy. Nope. I call this the safeties on the gun. I take my bridge hand off the cue, my cue's vertical. This is me thinking. Shoulders back, chin up, let's go. I'm thinking. I'm not shooting, I'm thinking. And then when I'm shooting, I'm shooting. This is thinking, this is shooting. And in between, there's something I do, which is once I've made up my mind, where's my target? How am I going to play this ball? Any doubts, any questions? Once I've settled, once my thinker is satisfied that it's done thinking, that's when I do my trigger. And the most important part of the pre-shot routine is this trigger that tells your brain, every single time I do this, it's time to go to bed. So one trigger that you see a lot is the air stroke. So I'm going to shoot 3 balls. Take a look. Thinking, drawing my target, air stroke. Thinking, checking my angles, air stroke. Hard to do this. Okay, thinking, checking angles, thinking about it, deciding if I need inside. Okay, air stroke. Best angle on the sticks. But my point is, yeah, it's pretty bad, guys. Yeah. Okay.
Nice recovery.
Yeah, I've got a lot going on in my mind right now with the camera rolling. Thinking about teaching, it's not good. So that's the rhythm. Thinking then shooting. Now I'll show you two other triggers.
Try to stay more towards the rack area, because when you get towards the head rail, it's too dark back there, and it's hard to see you.
Okay. So now I'll do what the Chinese and the Europeans do. which is the warrior pose where they do this. They go like this. They go. I almost did the air stroke. Here we go. You always know when they're ready to shoot because they do this. As long as you do it the same every time, that's time to be done thinking. Okay, and then my favorite. My all-time favorite is Billy Thorpe because he does the chalk slam cue wipe air stroke. So here we go. This is, every time he goes like this, he goes. Can't even do it, man. I don't know how he does it. Okay. So, okay. I can't do that. I'm just having some fun. So the point is though, is that there's a rhythm. So let me do one more run. I'm not going to say a word. I just want to do one run. I want you guys to look at two things. One, look at my trigger where I do my air stroke. See if you can see when my brain goes to sleep. And two, see if you can see how much time I'm actually taking to draw these targets. Last one.
So again, try to stay near at least the rack area though, if you can, because it even from the rack area, because of how dark your room is, it is a little difficult to see you.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to get you to set up some more lights in your pool room.
Okay.
Nicely done.
So, hang on, I got to do the Nate cam. Hang on. If Nate's still there, he knows what's coming. All right, so
here's an idea, Demetrius. Switch to your other camera.
Yeah. Nate's the man. If anybody hasn't checked out his website, Sensei Pool or Sensei Nate teaches pool. Anyway, go ahead.
But from this camera, could you at least demonstrate your air stroke before you get down on the ball?
Yeah. I mean, it's just I just do.
That way, people can actually understand what your trigger is to shut your plan mode off.
Yeah. So all I do is when I'm thinking, I'm thinking with my cue vertically, and then I just take it. I kind of just one or two air strokes to kind of get loose, and I drop on the shot. To me, that's kind of my trigger. I also take a deep breath. I usually take a deep breath. It helps kind of like relax the body and clear the mind. So, okay, long answer, but it's an important answer because it really is at the root. If you want to look at why do people play bad pool? Well, they miss too much. Why do they miss too much? Because they have tough shots. Why do they have tough shots? Is it because they don't hit their targets or they don't create their targets? And I would argue that they don't create targets very well. Why don't they create targets? Part of it is they don't know how. Hopefully I helped you guys start to understand how to actually start looking at table and seeing different levels of, purity of sweet spots. But also it's not just because they don't know how, it's because to Zach's point, they don't want to start thinking that hard because they don't know how to stop going into overthink mode where you start over analyzing and becoming, snake bit and paranoid and weak. So you have to think like you're a chump, and then you have to shoot like you're a champ. And you have to be able to switch gears, because if you don't switch gears, you're always going to be afraid to think. And how are you going to make a living playing pool if you're afraid to use your head? You have to have confidence that you can think, take a deep breath, put those thoughts aside, and go down and shoot. So the best way to do that is by doing it the same every time and having a trigger. And once you do your trigger, your brain goes to sleep. And then if you start thinking again, just stand back up and regroup. You have to do it the same every time. If you don't do it the same every time, not doing it 90% of the time to me is horrible. Let me explain why 90% of the time is horrible. When do you suppose it's going to fail? When you're comfortable or when you're nervous? You know what I mean? It's going to break down when you're uncomfortable. It's going to break down when you're under pressure and your heart's racing and time passage starts stretching out and you feel so anxious, you just want this over with. That's when you're going to rush things. And I'm telling you guys, a parachute that opens 90% of the time, you wouldn't want to put that in the market. It's not very good. 90%, I'm sorry to say.
That's a great analogy.
Well, and here's why I feel this way. Here it is, guys. There are things in pool that you can't control because they're too difficult. So the things that you can control, I have a deal with my students when I teach. I am the most forgiving coach in the world when it comes to failing things that you can't control. But I'm one of the most demanding and impatient coaches in the world when it comes to doing things we can control. So if there is something that you can control, then anything less than 100% is not really, I don't really understand. I don't get it. So do it 100% of the time, 100% of the time. If you watch me play pool, if you pull up videos of me playing pool, you'll see me miss shots. You'll see me get nervous. You'll see me dog it. You'll see me lose. But see if you can find one time where I don't do my pre-shot routine. I'll send $25 to the first person that can show me a clip of video where I don't do my pre-shot routine before the shot. I dare you.
And
going back to 20.
I'll even add something. If you do go back and watch any of Demetrius's old matches, there's another little tidbit that he does in his pre-shot routine, and I absolutely love it. And I don't even think he realizes that he does it anymore, but if you watch his grip hand, you'll see him flick his cue with his ring every time. No matter what, you'll see his grip hand go like this, and you'll see that his cue is spinning before he finally takes the shot. It's one of the first things I ever noticed about Demetrius when he shoots. I remember asking you about it years ago, and you just said it just comes natural to you.
Yeah, who knows, man, why we do the things we do sometimes. But tonight, if there's a couple things, if you've learned the importance of creating good targets, if you've learned some ideas on how to taking it from a vague area and a good intention to specific zones, and if you've understood some of the reasons why we might be reluctant, and a big part of that being we don't want to start overthinking and taking ourselves out of rhythm. And then we find that some of the answers to that are practice this enough that you don't have to overthink it, and develop a good pre-shot where your shooter can partner with your planner, and the planner can plan, shooter can shoot, planner can plan, plan like a nit, shoot like a beast, and get in the rhythm of alternating. And hopefully if you guys can work in some of that stuff, I know that you'll get better, and because there's simply, everybody's game is on fire here, guys. Everything's I'm watching people's pool game week after week after week. Strong players train with me without exception. It's all on fire. So if you can improve at it, again, you don't have to be great at it. You just have to improve at it, and you will be far ahead of your competition, because the good news is your competition is going to make all of these mistakes to you. And if you can just do it a little bit better than them, you're gonna win.
And as a testimonial, because I am one of Demetrius's students, when Demetrius met me, how long has it been now? 3-4 years?
4 years.
Yeah, 4 years. 4 years ago, when Demetrius met me, I was a 614 Fargo rated player. I went to his boot camp, and of course, after I leave, I have to be able to practice. I have to maintain everything that he's going to teach in his boot camp. And, and I'm human, so every now and again, I might forget something. I might send him a text saying, hey, what am I supposed to do with this? And, he'll remind me of things that I need to do, pre-shot routines or shot selections or whatever. Today, I play at a 651 Fargo rated player. So It's not, don't think of it as if you do attempt to contact Demetrius and you want to take his boot camp and you're magically going to become this better player. There is still work involved, but I can testify that what Demetrius preaches does work.
And I'll just say this, to go from 614 to 650, you guys got to realize 100 Fargo points is 100% improvement. It's like doubling your skill. And when you're a 614 player, you're not going to double your skill very easy. So to get from 614 to 651, that's like a 33% improvement. And when you're a strong local player and competitive in local tournaments, to get 33% better, think about what 33% means. And if he did that from 614, now if you come here and you're a 450 Fargo or a 550 Fargo or something like that, it's then the gains are going to be even bigger. I mean, it really is just, yeah, there's just a lot of room to improve. And then on the other side of things, for the guys like Nate Tam, who are like, 650 to 675 Fargo, where they're playing real strong, they're not going to see some huge increase. However, a 5 to 10% improvement for a guy who's 670 Fargo, getting 5 to 10% better. Like I've seen Nate play, he's not going to get 5 to 10% better at his, pocketing or as, on his break shot probably. I mean, maybe he's already starting to peak out on some other areas. So like getting 5 to 10% better when you're a strong regional player, that's pretty strong too. So the returns may look smaller in terms of percentage, but they're very meaningful for people that are passionate about this game. So, okay, cool.
Okay, let's see here. Well, actually, is there anything else that is that the gist of everything, or do you have any other topics that you want to cover?
No, as long as people understand the invisible blockers are the dead zones, they're there, guys. Take the time to figure out where those, take the time to figure out where you don't want to be, and avoid those invisible blockers. Treat it just that's my whole point, is treat it just as important as if those blockers were actually there. Yep.
Okay, so in the meantime, while I'm going through the chat and trying to find some questions that I saw that goes, viewers, if y'all have any more questions, get them in, because it sounds like the live stream is starting to wind itself down. Now, there is an off question that Zach Robbins did ask. He wanted to know if you're going to Turning Stone.
No, I was. I contacted Mike Zeiglin like 3 days after the other one in August ended. And he told me it was already a waiting list, and I'm on the waiting list. Tournaments these days, guys, are getting so tough to get into. They are filling so fast. So I'm on the waiting list for Turning Stone, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. I haven't heard from Mike, so I'm assuming I'm not in. But I will be at Derby, so I'll see you in Derby.
All right. This question here comes from Goba44 from YouTube. He says, so thinking 3 balls ahead versus working backwards from the money ball, when do you use the two? And I think that's a very scenario-based type of question, right? So
here's the answer. The true answer is, at the highest level, 3 balls ahead is no good. And I'll give you, I think 3 balls. Well, 2 balls ahead is no good. 3 balls might be good. Now, hold on. Let me give you an example. Let's see here. Okay, so we see this pattern: 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. In this case, I could make the 4, pull back for the 5, make the 5, and then I could just drag my, I could follow one rail up table off the 6 and just kind of float up for the 7, or even draw my ball up the rail maybe for the 7. So I'm looking at 4 balls ahead: 4, 5, 6, 7. I could play the 4, come up for the 5, play the 5, play the 6, bounce up table, and make the 7. But now suppose the 8's on the table. Well, this is 5 balls ahead. That's not 4 balls ahead. That's 5 balls ahead. So if I played it the same way, 4, 5, 6, you came up here for the 7, all of a sudden, man, it's going to be really tough to work my way up for the 8. So somebody 44, who was it, 44? Somebody 44?
Go above 44.
Anyway, so when we look at this, it's not good to be on the 7 anywhere. We have to be on this side of the 7 where we can follow across table. So 4, 5, 6, 7, we got to look 5 balls ahead now and realize that we need to be down here on the 7. And there's only one way to really guarantee that we get down here for the 7. We need to be over here for the 6 to swing around multiple rails, which means we want to be on this side rail for the 6 ball. So I don't want to be straight on the 5. I'd have to pull my ball back with draw. I'd rather be a little thinner on the 5 and roll around table. So because of the 8 ball, that changes my targets on everything else. So I'm just going to play for an angle on the 5. An angle, play my cue ball to the side rail. And now I'm going to make a point of coming all the way to the end rail. Little thin. Okay, missed it. It's tough. I don't really talk and play very well. So part of it is I got myself a little bit thin and I kind of one stroke that ball. But the point is, I got to my target, and that's how you have to play that run. So that's an example of how if you're only looking 3 balls ahead, listen, you got to start somewhere. In the beginning, when you're first holding your full cue, you don't look any balls ahead. You shoot the ball you're shooting. And then you look 1 ball ahead. And then you start playing 2 balls ahead and thinking about your angle. But really at the world-class level, you have to skim through the whole rack. And you don't sort the rack from beginning to end or end to beginning. You sort the rack by priority. And you look at what are the most tricky transitions in the whole rack. And you figure out a plan for those first, and then you build the rest in around that one. That's really how you read a rack. Yep.
All right. Here's a compliment from someone that either has worked with you or at least follows you. This is from Mike Fields. He says he loves listening to the talks between you and Jesse Angle and Nate Tam.
Cool. I will pass that on. Well, I think Nate's in the audience. I'm actually going to do another pod with Jesse next Wednesday. We've got a good one lined up I'm excited about. So I will pass the word. Thank you very much, Mr. Fields.
All right, this next question comes from S3204. Says a couple of times he thought you might have played position for a corner pocket, but instead you played for a side pocket. Can you explain why you would do that? Picking corners versus sides.
In short, it's all a trade-off. It's of course there's many times you have to play for both. There's many times when the side pocket, gives you less cue ball control if you can't get to a rail. There's times when it's just tough to make the ball on the side. I mean, there's times you're going to do both. But in general, what I would say is on a 7-foot valley bar table, I am going to play, the corner pockets are very large. And so I might play for more corner pocket shape. Whereas on a 9-foot diamond, it's really easy. There are certain shots that you almost would never miss on a bar table that you could easily miss on my table. So the percentages, like put it another way. Suppose that the side pockets were 5 inches big and the corner pockets were 3 7/8, and they were super, super shim, super tight. Well, you would play a lot of side pocket shape. So my table is not that bad. I would say a valley is like the opposite. The corners are so big, you're going to play a lot of corner pocket shape. On a 9-foot diamond with, deep shelves and tight pockets, you might lean towards playing for the side a little bit more often just because you can make the ball that way. It's the act between, the difficulty, and it just leans as you get bigger and bigger and the pockets get tighter and tighter, it leans to a little bit more side pocket play. So my guess would be, maybe I'm wrong, but my guess would be that this gentleman plays a lot of bar table pool, and then it's definitely, when you play more on a bar table, you're definitely going to tilt a little bit more towards corners.
Okay. So you know how you missed the last shot, and you even said that you got thin, you kind of one-stroked it and stuff. Brian Lowell wants to know, if he points out that you had no pre-shot routine on your last miss, does he get the $25?
Unfortunately, no, it has to be in competition. So I'm actually making up fine print. So you didn't read the fine print because I'm actually now creating my fine print, which is it has because when I'm not really used to talking and playing and teaching and pointing and stuff. It's not really competition. So, but to be fair, yeah, I probably just plopped down on that ball and missed. So maybe actually I was trying to demonstrate why we need a pre-shot routine. I'm running out of excuses. Bail me out, Chris. Okay, no. I've got one more excuse. I'm a pool teacher. I actually don't have $25. That's the real answer.
Now, Demetrius has learned firsthand when it comes to a player like myself that who's also a content creator. We did see in the chat that Shortstop on Pool has stopped by, and so
Keller, nice to see you, Bob.
And so has one of my dogs. But the idea is that it is very difficult to shoot and talk at the same time. You just like what you've heard Demetrius preach all through the night. It's something that you just have to practice on, and it just does not come easy. It comes easier to me because I've got 6 years of practice with it, doing YouTube and stuff. And a lot of other people will know and understand that it is very difficult to shoot and talk at the same time. So, you know, that's the reason. I won't even call it an excuse, but that is the reason that I'm going to give you, because I first experienced it when I started my YouTube channel, and then it just got easier and easier the more that I did it.
Awesome, guys. If you guys want, like I said, this was not really aimed at 9-ball, although I had a few ideas. This was mainly aimed at target creation in general. But I do have, of course, some thoughts on 9-ball. We can always look at some 9-ball stream down the road. So, you know, if you guys want to see me again, just let Chris know in the comments, and I'll be back.
Absolutely. So that pretty much sounds like the end of it. So I will say, if you've made it at least this far and you haven't done so, please give the stream a thumbs up, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. It really doesn't matter. If you're watching on Facebook, do consider sharing the stream to your Facebook profile. That way your friends and family can get to know me and Demetrius and maybe gain an interest in pool. And then, of course, share it to your favorite pool groups as well. Liking the stream on YouTube helps me out in the YouTube algorithm. So that way more people can discover the stream after the fact. There was one more question, and this one was for me. I almost did forget about it. Loping CSF is wanting to know any updates on my table, and the answer is yes. My table is hoping to arrive sometime early February, and then I'm going to be in full force. Well, I won't say, you know, the moment the table gets here, like I'm going to be live. Like I have to get the table set up, then I got to start setting up my cameras, running cables through my ceilings and setting up my microphone. So but once the table gets here, probably sometime late February, early March, I'll be back in full force creating content again. So I am going to end the stream with Demetrius. Plug your stuff one more time.
MN Pool Bootcamp, MN for Minnesota. MNPoolBootCamp.com. If you guys want to geek out, you know, I talk a lot about improvement. You know, I talk a lot about finding the weak areas in people's game, physically, mentally, and then strategically, and then putting together a plan to train on those areas by teaching and then drilling and teaching and drilling so that they can actually see their play evolve in real time, so that they go home a better player and they have a clear plan for the future. 3 days, hard work, and I'm all about improvement. I always talk about plugging my boot camp and plugging what we do here. I'll tell you, I'll add one plug. I had a gentleman yesterday that trained with me for a little bit. He was a local guy for 4 hours, and somebody actually bought him the lesson as a Christmas present. And the gentleman that bought him the lesson, he said that he really, he's worked with me and done my 3-day boot camp. And he said he really wanted his friend, who was a league team member, to take a lesson with me. And when the guy asked, he said, he says, Demetrius, he's the best coach in the country. That's what he told him. So I'm parroting. I just got a referral yesterday, helped this guy out because I'm pretty good at what I do. So I always preach improvement, what I can do for you. But there's another thing. It is so fun. It is so fun. It's hard. It can be challenging. But guys, to just geek out on pool for 3 days and get deeper and deeper and deeper, And I'm telling you, we eat meals and we're talking about stuff during meals and thinking about stuff and just geeking out. It is a lifetime memory. And it is, if you're a serious pool player that loves this game and wants to improve, you're like, I feel like it's something you should do because you'll probably get better and it's going to be memorable. That's all.
For sure. And again, I can definitely testify that. Demetrius, any final thoughts?
Nah, that's good. I think we're good. Thank you guys all for tuning in. I appreciate you guys because for those, I couldn't do this if it wasn't for people's passion for pool. And it gives me, you guys, your passion for pool allows me to do what I love to do and it keeps me going. So thank you for sharing this game.
All right. Then with that in mind, everybody, thank you so much for being here and have a good night.